Welcome back to Film Files. In today's file, we will be uncovering an American crime thriller film from 1999 titled The Bone Collector. Sit back, and let's dive in. The movie starts with Lincoln Rhyme as a detective checking out a crime scene. Except that this same crime scene is a very hazardous one. It's not long before a metal beam like the one found on construction sites drops on him. We are then fast-forwarded to the present, and it seems Lincoln was having a bad dream. But his dream is not so far off from reality. He is bedridden by accident. His nurse, Thelma, is always on call. He even has the mind to ask her for some vodka, but as his primary caregiver, she insists on some juice instead. The Rubins are at the airport just back from their trip and are waiting for their transport, but he doesn't show. Mr. Rubin threatens to fire him once they meet. So they are forced to take a cab. As it drives them away, the couple drifts off to sleep. After a while, Mrs. Rubin wakes up and realizes the driver is going the wrong way. She calls her husband's attention to it as they scream at the driver to stop. He turns a deaf ear and continues to speed on. The Rubins are trapped in the car and are most definitely being kidnapped. Back at his apartment, Lincoln's doctor visits him. Once Thelma is done with the usual morning routine, she leaves them both to talk but goes around the corner and eavesdrops on their conversation. Lincoln wants to be euthanized, but the doctor disagrees with him entirely. He knows it's a matter of time before Lincoln's spinal injury develops into a vegetative state. So they put a pin in it for the time being. Just as Thelma shakes her head while she is away from view. Officer Amelia is looking out the window from her boyfriend's apartment. It's morning, and she gets dressed for work as a New York cop. Her boyfriend wants to know how exactly to categorize their relationship, but Amelia answers defensively and doesn't necessarily want to deal with the issue right now. She meets up with her partner downstairs at a hot dog stand. Just then, a dispatch calls in, and she leaves to check it out. When she gets to the spot, a kid points her towards what he found. There is a hand jutting out of the ground. Amelia digs the gravel a little, and a male face is revealed. There are some more clues on the train tracks themselves. Just then, a train approaches, and Amelia has the mind to jump on the tracks as she signals the train to stop. The train driver does so and comes to a halt inches from the evidence. Soon enough, the crime scene is crawling with officers. A superior detective even goes as far as criticizing Amelia for stopping a train in its tracks. We are back at Lincoln's apartment, and two cops arrive. Their orders come from above to ask Lincoln for help with the investigation. He seems to be the best, and they tell him about the Rubins and how they got into a taxi and were never seen until the discovery of Mr. Rubin's body. His wife is still missing, and we see her assailant cuffing her to a chain in an abandoned duct. As Lincoln is being briefed, he carefree dismisses the case as an open and closed one, but the officers insist there is more to it. But then, Lincoln starts to have a seizure and Thelma throws the detectives out in the interim. Lincoln soon recovers and sees that his police buddies left behind some crime scene photos for him to work through. With one look, he is hooked and so gets on the phone. Soon his room is turned into a command center as some specially picked officers help with the case. Amelia is also invited, seeing she was the one who first discovered the crime scene. She is skeptical at first while citing that forensics is not part of her career plan. But Lincoln sees something in her and encourages her to stay on. They are all soon ankle-deep in the case, trying to crack it. The perpetrator has deliberately left some clues for the detectives to determine the location where Mrs. Rubin is being kept. With the help of his team, Lincoln cross-references the clues and can somehow determine where Mrs. Rubin is being kept. It's a good hypothesis, and so some patrol cars are sent there. As the officers are en route, Lincoln solves the last clue, and they are able to pinpoint exactly where she is. She is being kept in a network of underground steam pipes that usually release pent-up steam at precisely 4 p.m. daily. So the cops are working against the clock. They can hear Mrs. Rubin through a concrete wall but can't seem to shut off the steam valve. The kidnapper has made sure of that by tampering with it. So like clockwork, the steam is let out by 4 p.m., and it kills Mrs. Rubin while the officers are helpless to save her. Amelia is there too as the newest forensics officer under Lincoln's guidance. So Amelia is given exclusive access to what's left of the crime scene after a hole is blown through the concrete. She is not a trained forensics officer, so Lincoln has to guide her remotely. At some instance, he asks her to cut the dead victim's hands off to retrieve some fingerprint-laden handcuffs. This is where Amelia draws the line on what she can or cannot do. She abruptly leaves the crime scene in frustration. She takes a cab home, and it seems someone is watching her from a distance in the same taxi the perp used to kidnap the Rubins. Amelia is sulking in her apartment and refuses to take any calls. Soon an officer comes around to check on her. They, and especially Lincoln, wants her back on the team. She gets dressed. Back at Lincoln's apartment, he indirectly apologizes for asking her to do something she was uncomfortable with. All the officers soon get wind of a new victim. The same cab driver has picked up a student. The perp was also seen bludgeoning the student with a torchlight to prevent him from getting away before speeding off with the student in the back of the car. He takes the student to an abandoned abattoir. Then he makes some strategic cuts on the student, which are consistent with his MO. Then he leaves the student to be eaten by the rats as they smell the blood. The officers at Lincoln's apartment get into gear. The perp has seemingly left clues to his next victim in the previous crime. And the officers are able to piece the clues as they come. This time, there are some rat hairs and a bone gotten from a cow. This definitely points to an old abattoir. There are only 3 of those close by. Lincoln points Amelia and 2 other detectives to the one he has his money on. They get there, and Amelia has to go in alone. She eventually spots the victim in the distance within the abattoir. He has been tied up and feasted upon by the rats. He is also manifestly dead by now. And with Amelia's reaction, you can tell that the forensic bug has bitten her as she insists the other officers step out of the crime scene boundary so she can work. Lincoln smiles at this. As Amelia works, she finds yet another clue. It is a matchbox, and as she prepares to bag it, the notorious Captain Howard, known for his difficulty, swoops in and takes over the operation. They even shut down Lincoln's command center. Howard wants his team on the case. Amelia has to remain in his office for the time being to prevent her from getting back. As she sits across from Howard, his own forensics man gets a hit on the fingerprint. It's a matter of time before they ascertain the identity of their alleged kidnapper and murderer. They trace the taxi to a warehouse but find a lifeless body sprawled underneath the taxi and discover it is yet another victim. The perp has fooled them. Back at his apartment, Lincoln gets a package from his trusted forensic pathologist. He had asked Eddie to scour the police archives for cases similar to this one. So Lincoln is now going through the files with Amelia. They recognize that the MO is the same. The perp always leaves a clue to his next target. But back then, the officers in charge didn't know any better. As they talk, Lincoln starts to experience another seizure. Thelma rushes to his side and administers to him. She tells Amelia of his plan to be euthanized. Howard knocks on the door, but Thelma is determined not to let him in because Lincoln is out cold and needs his rest. Howard then leaves but says he will return with a warrant. The perp is at the airport again, and this time he picks up a grandfather with his granddaughter. As they drive through the city, a cop stops the cab. On his approach, the perp grabs him inside the car window and shoots him through the chest before speeding away. Lincoln is immediately put on a call. And with Amelia's help, they piece together a paper fragment puzzle left by the perp. They are able to figure that it comes from a Crime Stories book logo. Amelia quickly goes to the library and somehow finds this random book. As she reads it, she is alarmed to find that all the cases they have been working on mirror the illustrations in the book. More significantly, it gives them a clue about the grandpa and granddaughter's kidnapping. Maybe they can stop it. The officers are pointed towards the pier in the water and luckily, they find something. The little girl is pulled out of the water and resuscitated, but her granddad is not so lucky. Amelia starts to scan the surrounding area for clues. She finds a map and a piece of a police badge. But Howard arrives and disrupts her comms with Lincoln. He wants to place her under arrest, but she sneaks away to follow a clue. She steps into an abandoned station and surveys its relics for more clues. Then she finds a sequence of digits on the wall and has to crack her brain as to what they represent. Finally, she hits the jackpot. They are the same numbers on Lincoln's police badge. Meaning, he is the next victim. She rushes down. By now, the perp has killed Howard, who was snooping, and Thelma, who answered the door. You can tell it is someone familiar by the way Thelma received him. He goes into Lincoln's room now and comes into full view. He is Richard, the life support machine's technician. But his real identity is Marcus, a disgraced forensics officer Lincoln helped expose some time ago. He is here to avenge his suffering. He tries to torture Lincoln, but his hand gets accidentally jammed in between Lincoln's automated bed. This slows him down well enough for Amelia to get there and shoot him before he stabs Lincoln. It's now Christmas at Lincoln's apartment and a far cry from his original intentions for an assisted suicide. A few friends are around. Even Lincoln's estranged sister stops by with her family thanks to a call from Amelia. And Amelia rubs Lincoln's hand like she cares for him. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and hit that notification button to open more files like this.